And we are live. This is totally unscripted. I'm Martin Hoxie. That's Charles, Cara, Alice. Got it right. Sorry. This is unscripted, so anything can happen. Anything might happen. So
I might get blown away in a tornado.
So today we're talking about a topic that we've touched upon a couple of times previously on Totally Unscripted, but it's been a while since we talked about AppSheet. And I think we were all at Next, and the AppSheet booth was buzzing. The sessions were really packed. I think, AppSheet's been around for a number of years now, but it feels like it's coming of age. It feels like everyone wants to solve their own problems, their own work issues with a little no code. I don't know how you feel, Charles, about that.
I mean, obviously, whatever you call it, citizen development, power user, whatever the use case is, I think you're absolutely right. Folks who have the problem, have the need to solve the problem, understand the problem well, can often best do it themselves. And I think AppSheet is a great tool that allows you to jump in there and do that yourself, really regardless of your technical.
I don't think you need to be a power user. I mean, you can just start with having a spreadsheet and then boom, as long as your spreadsheet's structured well enough, it becomes an app.
That's absolutely it, right? And the promise is, obviously, queen of spreadsheets. Spreadsheets can get amok pretty fast, right? If you don't do it well. But I've always was, enamored by the beauty of AppSheet to take a spreadsheet with even limited structure, pull it in, build an application, and you're playing with that in minutes. Yeah. If it doesn't work, you go out and you realign your spreadsheet, try it again, pull it back in and see if it works. And normally you have something up and running pretty fast. So you're right. It's not overly technical.
It does feel like it's a little bit of something for everybody, though, because it can get technical if you want it to. So.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. I think part of it is you can get to a solution fast, or you can get something working fast, but getting working exactly the way you need it to work, maybe you have to pull a few levers to make that work. And so I think that's pretty interesting as well.
I think as well, AppSheet as well, it there's a lot of talk around machine learning, generative AI, but AppSheet's had that built into the product from the very beginning, which is probably a nice segue into our guest, who's a bit of a machine learning expert. I think Charles, or in Cara, I think you know our guests quite well. Would you like to do the intros?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I've had the pleasure of working with Mike. He's an engineering lead on AppSheet, which is very exciting because I think normally on this show, we're talking to a lot of product people, but today we get to talk to an engineering lead, get his take on AppSheet. So Mike Procopio is someone I've known for a while now and had the pleasure of spending time eating lunch and riffing on ideas. And he's very creative, and he's very well known in the workspace community as a leader in the space. He did a great talk at Next. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching it. But yeah, I'm excited to talk to him about the things that he talked about in the session, the announcements that came out, things that are, recently launched. But Charles, do you have anything to add before we bring him on?
No, let's just bring him on. I think you did a pretty good job there. There he is.
There he is.
Hello. Thank you all so much for having me. What an awesome format and what a really neat thing to be a part of. I'm excited to be here. Thank you. And thank you for the warm welcome, Cara. I really appreciate it.
I don't know, Mike, if you want to just start by giving a bit of your background story, because at Next we bonded over Google Drive.
We did. Yes.
And I think that's a product you've had quite a bit to do with, and again with the kind of machine learning, generative AI bit of it as well.
Yeah. Those threads are pretty prominent. Happy to chat a little bit about it, and I'll maybe time box it to a couple of minutes just by way of intro. But again, thank you so much for having me on the show. Background here with Google started about 14 years ago. It's funny how the years passed. Always a software engineer by background, and started on the Google Drive team here in Boulder. Didn't quite know what kind of a ride I was in for, and you never really do in the earlier moments of your career. But it has been a wonderful, incredible experience. Started off on Drive back when the very notion of a cloud-based file explorer in the cloud was still quite novel. This was in the right around 2010 when it was the very earliest days of Google Docs as we know it, the very earliest days of real-time collaboration, and it was just so wild to see the idea of a document or a spreadsheet or later on slideshow presentation that could be worked on live collaboratively. And remember, at the time, it was decades of Control S save, and hopefully that worked. So I was really invigorated by the space. Very quickly, Drive's genesis was, hey, you need a place to organize and find these things and store them in a common list. But even that had a lot of challenges. Just bringing that concept into the cloud and allowing all the features that we know of a file explorer. Well, and it was incredible. My earliest features were around, Martin, we talked about this around upload, earlier days of the web. So even ideas of like drag and drop upload was still very novel. I'll never remember how jazzed I was the first time I was had my local demo working after hacking for as long as we do. Drag and drop these files, and then they upload, and then they were in the cloud. So it's interaction between your local operating system and your desktop browser was really powerful to see. I was so invigorated by that. And then that quickly brought me into the API space when we recognized early on that we wanted to have a first-class API to let people not only build apps using a file system, but also integrate them thoughtfully into Drive. And that's when I really started getting a little more into the developer space beyond just being a developer myself. That was on the Drive API team after the front-end team. And, we can talk a little bit more about the history there, suffice it to say that my background in machine learning and AI soon merged into Drive with the file cards at the top, where Drive predicted the things that you were most likely to want to click on. And it was a very successful thing, saved the users a lot of time. That's the output of a machine learning model. And that was one of the earliest times that I saw a good use of AI inside a productivity app. And really started to believe this idea. And I know we'll revisit it later around meeting users where they're at. And then from Drive, I found my way to AppSheet and to you all here today. So that's maybe 2 or 3 minutes of background. I'm happy to dive in as we go.
Okay, so what took you from Drive to AppSheet? What was that fork in the road that you took?
Yeah, so there was actually so it was 8 years on Drive, and that was quite a long time. Growing from an IC, it was still figuring everything out. IC means individual contributor, lot of code, learning from original. Yeah, can we say? Oh, yeah. The original folks who hired into Google in the early days and standing on their shoulders and learning so much. Quickly, to leadership, and at the 8 years in, it was managing large teams and speaking at Cloud Next, and it was invigorating. But I felt the pull to push the reset button a little bit and return to an IC role. This is very normal in a career. It was explained to me at the time when I was figuring out, like, is this okay? Like, wanting to change it up a little bit. It's a pendulum, and it swings back and forth. And indeed, it has for me several times between leadership-oriented things and IC-oriented things. Really good to revisit both because it's a different set of capabilities and muscles, right? So that was the Drive, and I found it's an interesting interim. For 2 years, I worked in a special startup-centric pocket of Google that did early stage AI startup funding. And as part of the investment relationship there called Gradient, they would support that with a Google engineer to kind of help the startup emerge with all the problems that startups have. So that was for a couple of years, but it was a bungee, right? It's a short-term rotation by design, and that was amazing. Found my way back to IC work, and also a lot of the mentorship. A lot of time in San Francisco, and it was a nice contrast to the days on Drive. But all of those lessons still applied, and I met some incredible people. And then when that was wrapped up, it was time for the next step, and I knew I wanted to be in the developer space. And the reason why is, if you zoom out, work can get too transactional, and that's not the most healthy place to be, right? There is this concept here. But it is okay to have areas that you're passionate about. It doesn't necessarily need to be your entire purpose. But I have always found purpose and passion in building developer tools, simply because it's invigorating to me to be even the concept of building tools that people will then create on. And I have no idea what they'll create. And it's always surprising. And that is very exciting for me. So that's what drove me to AppSheet, which was a new acquisition. felt very startup-y, still does when I just had that experience, but also needed a way to thoughtfully emerge inside Google post-acquisition, as acquisitions do. And to this day, I think we've walked a reasonable line between integrating in Google, but still keeping that kind of scrappier startup culture and ethos. So it's a great place for me. Dev tools, startup-y things, but get to teach some of the leadership aspects about how to thrive and succeed at Google, both at the project level and individual team level. So I am so excited to be here. And then just exposure points like Cloud Next are very awesome opportunities for me that I love doing. So that's the short way. It was a great question. Yeah, what made you made that change? And here we are. I think AppSheet was acquired. Was it 3 years for me, but maybe 3.5 years ago is when the talks were. So
you made a couple of good points while you were talking about. First of all, thank you for coming on, by the way. I love getting insights from folks inside of Google for folks outside of Google. I like how you were dropping some names in there, like a Bungie, for example. For folks who don't know, Bungie is when you actually do a little stint on a job and come back. And so there's a lot of kind of Google speak that goes on. I have a question for you. Carol alluded to this in your intro. We've had a lot of PMs. Traditionally, PMs come out and promote the product and talk about the product. But you're an engineering lead. How is that different? What's the kind of the responsibilities? What would you say? As I know you're kind of counterparts, but how are you different? What's the functional differences between the two while you're giving some Google secrets away?
Yeah, no, that's great. That is great. Let me focus. Really insightful question. And I spend a lot of time thinking about this, right? As one does, figuring out their role. Where can you add value? Where are the things that you can most distinctly impact the world? But let me focus on just the second part, just to make sure we don't go into too much Google parlance. Yeah, just explaining a little bit, just as you mentioned. PM is product manager, generally focused on ownership of the product, and there are a lot of aspects to a PM role. On some sides, it's specifying the product. We're actually figuring out what the product needs to do. It's very close collaboration with user experience or designers on the design side. So it's more on the UI side. Working through not just static screens, but also persona-driven user experience, understanding what the users are doing, working closely with people who are conducting user research to understand how the early versions of what you're doing, like wireframes and mock-ups and prototypes, where they might struggle and what sorts of concepts are more easily understood than others. And that's always been, So a product manager also may touch on things like strategy and competitive analysis and roadmaps and customer engagement on the external side, especially for a product like AppSheet, which is so customer driven. So PM is a large, wide-ranging skill set to have, and is not my traditional role at Google, but we'll talk about that in a second. Engineering lead, for me, it's starts typically off with a software engineering background, although there can be many fantastic managers who don't have as strong of an engineering background, right? Because even the managing skill set is a little bit different. But my particular niche role at Google is tech lead / manager, which means performing people management while also having strong technical guidance in the product. So reviewing designs, reviewing code, occasionally coding. It's rarer and rarer these days, and this is kind of a known thing for how it goes. And so the TLM, tech lead manager role, is my former role here at Google, where you have direct reports, but also influence over the technical side. But a lot of architecture review, thinking about what pieces need to be in place. A lot of consideration in both of these roles about risk, product risk. What sorts of things are risky given schedule and delivery timeframes, and where the market is going, and what analysts are telling us that their users need to see, and what researchers, what our customers are telling us directly that they need to see, versus playing the game of understanding that we're very constrained and just all of the resources and time in particular. So with that background, a little bit, just a quick nudge. Even though my role is Eng manager, and by the way, thank you for having me on the team, even as on the call, even as an Eng lead. My earliest days were in front-end development, which has this very interesting side effect of putting you very close, not just to the user, but to the product manager and UX, that's user experience, and UXD, user experience design roles in particular. So from the very earliest days of my career, even in college, was working on front-end applications, which have this unique property, which I absolutely love. So over time, you develop two instincts, and different people, even in the TLM role, have different sorts of skill sets. there are some people who are much more rigorous on the technical side, architecture, scaling, systems, Kubernetes engine integration, understanding virtual machines, that's VMs, and memory usage. And then there are people who a little bit more like me, broader skill set, think a little bit more about the business on the competitive side and understanding our users and personas. So I've always cared about that, and I am lucky to be in a role where I get to flex that a little bit. It definitely helps me, succeed. And but now that's not to say that I haven't had people come up to me and put their hand on me and say, "Mike, you're a PM, man. You're a PM." That actually happened. That it's like that's yeah.
So I wonder,
case,
just in terms of your involvement with AppSheet. So I know you've been part of some pretty significant things in AppSheet. Can you just give us? I'm giving you permission to show off. What have you helped land in the product?
This is going to be hard, but I love I was reading a LinkedIn post recently about the importance of tactics. If we're not careful, we can talk a little bit too much about strategy. It can come across hollow, and for me, really care about depth. And that at the end of the day comes down to the things that you're shipping, right? The things that are actually impacting people that you're shipping. So I love the question. Certainly when I started here 3 years ago, I cared very much about, in fact, I held off on the managerial side to try and ship a few things and be involved in that and really make sure I stay close to the code for a period of time. Couldn't hold out forever, and that's okay. So for me, one of the earliest things working on was always the workspace integration aspects. And the things that were in progress when I got here were the first order workspace integration things. So this is create an AppSheet app from a Google Sheet from within Sheets. This is a right-click open with menu and Drive. This is some of the first order admin console things, such as a rough level on-off toggle that you can have to enable or disable the service from the Workspace admin console. But it very quickly came into these next order, second order workspace things, more nuanced integrations. So just briefly, that's the dynamic email, which the community may know as AMP for email. It's accelerated mobile pages for email. Launched, basically, it's a way to render rich data and dynamic data-bound forms and views inside Gmail. As it turns out, AppSheet is, from the highest level, an automatic form generator on top of a data source. But this was our first foray into Workspace and to meeting the user where they're at. We'll hear a little bit more about that, keeping the user in context to maximize productivity and reduce friction. So that was one of the first things we worked on. The add-on in Google Sheets, chat apps, which is where you can do similarly to dynamic email. It uses a different technology, but lets you render editable data-bound views directly inside Google Chat. That was launched last year. An important add-on for that, which is the one-click deploy. I know this is something that this community cares about a lot. Just reducing the barrier to entry, not just the development, but just the deployment side. Configuring OAuth, API keys, creating the GCP project, creating the roles inside GCP. I mean, these are barriers to entry to a successful app, especially in many cases for the kind of user that we're targeting in a no-code and low-code development environment, which whose stated goal is to democratize the ability to create apps across a wide range of skill sets and functions. So, and then just a couple more things. We talked about at Cloud Next, we talked about the AppScript integration, which I know is near and dear to the folks on this call, to my heart as well, for a variety of reasons we'll get into. And then most recently launched today, the Google Forms integration, as well as the admin console, which we can demo here later today, where we focus on empowering administrators with the ability to govern apps. I'll pause there. That's just a couple minutes of just rattling resume rattling off here. I'm
going to let someone else ask a question, but thank you for AppScript integration.
Yes, one of my all-time favorites for sure. We'll talk.
Absolutely. Hey, let's do this. First of all, I mean, you've got to handle so many things. Just for anybody who maybe is more AppScript or maybe full-blown dev, can you step back and throw your PM hat back on for a second? And just, what is AppSheet, in case nobody really knows it? Who's it for?
Yeah.
What would you tell a developer to think about it if they're more, code-centric? And how do you position it against kind of the full stack of solutions that Workspace offers for building solutions?
Yeah, just take notes so I don't forget that second part of the question there. It's an excellent question, and by way of setting background. So one of the things I work hard to do is not, it's been a career in computer science, right? Went to school for it, and it is very important to remember, and I work hard to make sure I remember what it was like in those earliest days of needing to do a thing and not even knowing where to begin. I knew that there was something, in this case, my first job out of college, during college, was working for medical practice, creating software to help track the patients to have better outcomes so they could have reports for their visits. And that's already, you're talking about a patient database with views and reports and different roles like practitioners and administrative oriented individuals on the financial side. And, so that already it was just way in over my head, like had a job, had to do a thing. So I spend a lot of time reminding myself of what it was like in that very feeling of needing to do a thing and not being able to, not knowing where to start. We talked about where I got my start, Charles. We can dive into that a little bit. But if you can think back to that moment, and one nice thing about working in our profession, no matter what your role is there are ample opportunities to feel like a novice again. And I really encourage us to be comfortable with sitting in that space. For me, is it one of these guitars here? Is it or is it a new technology? And even with a background in machine learning and AI, the pace of what we're able to do with generated models is moving so fast. I still feel like a novice with this stuff. So it is good to refresh ourselves of what it feels like truly in our core to have an idea and be able to conceptualize what we want to do and not even know where to begin. I would say one way to think about it is that AppSheet is designed for that person who has basically an idea for an app, but sometimes it doesn't even look like an idea for an app. Sometimes it's an existing person who is, who owns a business process very often. Now, business process sounds like a kind of a word that's like, oh, it's this big thing in a big organization. And yes, that exists. But there's a lot, long tail. And by that, I mean just a wide range of small and medium-sized organizations, proprietorships, small businesses, medium-sized businesses that have these ad hoc business processes. Sometimes they're paper, sometimes they're not even documented. And another person that AppSheet is oriented for is designed for that person to be able to automate their existing informal business process that might not even be documented. Maybe it's a travel request. Maybe it's something that worked fine at a smaller scale when a company was 1 to 5 people, but doesn't anymore with volume, and maybe even just we're reached to the point where tracking in a sheet, right? Kind of one of the Google Sheets, the universal application that is. So I don't need to tell you all that. That is so versatile, but when you need to move past that in your business process, AppSheet is excellent for that use case. Finally, in a larger organization, because AppSheet has built-in robust administrative controls, it is an excellent place for companies that are experimenting with decentralizing otherwise centralized IT to where an application development might be in-house in kind of a boutique area, but it's designed for a company that wants to democratize that and empower more people in the organization to build apps for whatever they need, while also being able to govern it. Things like, whether data can be shared externally, what sort of auth providers, and so on. That's on the governance side, and we'll see that here in a little bit. So right off the bat, that's three people who might be interested in using AppSheet, and it includes the entire continuum, including hobbyists that has an idea is like, hey, I'd like to do this. Especially, hey, I already have some data, I'd like to view it. The number of use cases, mobile use cases for frontline workers, inspections, people. So it's very good even for the hobbyist side, for somebody just trying to figure out how they might prototype an idea that they have, where you can kind of get started in, let's say, for example, on the order of a day, in a world where things can take so much time and we're just so time constrained continually. So
I think that's where it gets really interesting. You talked about
go ahead.
A couple of different populations there, and obviously with developers in a business are quite a small population, but as you're talking there, you're talking about bigger populations of people and bigger populations that have their own problems and their own existing workflows that they have to solve those problems, but they get to a point where they want to do more automation, or they want tighter governance around what they're doing. And I think that's in the context of Google Workspace. I was so pleased to see AppSheet Core land for the majority of licenses, because I think there's a great community in Google Workspace.
Yes.
At different levels. That, yeah, I think the foundations were laid with Google Drive. You've made this really easy to use place for data, and now AppSheet is an easy to use product to move data around your business.
Yes.
Which I think just, we kind of touched upon that, the governance of data and the challenges, whenever you start giving people ownership of their own processes, and dealing with corporate data. What advice would you give to customers who want to embrace AppSheet but not become completely overwhelmed by it?
Yes, it's an excellent perspective, because it speaks a little bit to the concept that organizations are dynamic, businesses change. Now more so than ever, things feel like they are accelerating, because they are accelerating. It's one of the value propositions of AppSheet, is to be able to adapt and evolve with your business here today. A couple of things to think about is, as your organization scales, the processes and the team structure that you have in place, may not work, and may need to change. This is central to AppSheet's kind of thesis for how we can do governance. It can be very lightweight, and it can be non-existent from the very beginning. So some of the important pieces of advice that I have from the outset, if you're a large organization, you understand you have these structures in place. You have some centralized IT somewhere on that continuum. It might be distributed across a couple of things, but you probably have teams and processes in place. But if you're not that person, which is important, both are important target markets for AppSheet, hold some space in your thinking about what does it mean about the concept of application lifecycle, where you're going to build it, but once you have it, sometimes these things, there's two ways it can go. Sometimes these things can be short-lived. Other times, like an API, some of the stuff we worked on Drive is still running 10, 12 years later, and might continue in the future. The staying power of the things that we write and ship is worth reflecting on. And when you start thinking about timescales like that, it's reasonable to hold some space that the apps that you build are going to need to be governed and managed. It is very easy to stifle things with really difficult, heavyweight management software with capabilities that are too difficult to express. AppSheet's governance uses its same universal expression engine, and any concept that you can express in the app when you're building the app can also be expressed as a policy. For example, restrict external sharing, restrict data provider when it is X or Y. So a couple of points of advice: be thinking about, if you're a smaller organization, how one day soon you might want to have basic lightweight controls in place as your organization scales. AppSheet is designed specifically for this use case. The second perspective is that monitoring is important. We're making huge investments in this space. You'll be able to see this here shortly when I demo the admin console. It's important for you to understand how these apps are being used in your organization, or by whom, even regardless of the organization size. And then finally, understand that your requirements may evolve over time. And as one final nudge, what we have found that is most successful is a lighter weight approach to its governance, because the idea is that you want to empower as many people in that kind of in the distribution in your organization as possible, who are able to write apps. You don't want to create barriers to entry if you're going to democratize app development, and if you're going to truly embrace this notion of citizen development. That itself is a really important business proposition. It says that you're going to empower the technologists and the people in your organization to adapt to whatever the requirements they see. And Charles taught me this, that the business owner, the process owner, the person actually working with the Google Sheet or working with their org knows that process better than anybody in the org. That's the person who's prepared to translate a paper process or a manual process or a sheets-oriented process into something more automated. And that's the person that you want to empower to do that, as opposed to a year's life cycle of requirements gathering and so on. It's just an extremely efficient way to do that. And so that is AppSheet at its best is when you can empower people to do that, even in a large organization like Airbus, for example. They're largely empowered to do that, but there has to be some lightweight governance in place. That may evolve over time, and AppSheet is set up to do that as well. In other words, add increasingly strict policies over time at the org level, individual level, team level, and so on. Maybe a long-winded answer, but those are a couple things to think about on the, I think that's your question, Martin, is on the governance side. So how do we begin to frame it?
How about a picture's worth 1,000 words? You want to show us some of the new things you can do around kind of management?
Yeah, sure. This is great time on the governance side here. I'll be quick here. Let me see here. You can go ahead and switch to the screen. Okay. So this journey is going to begin here. And basically what I'll do is just take a couple of minutes, just in the interest of time, to walk through where we're at. What we are talking about is the AppSheet admin console. This is the front end, this is the UI experience built in AppSheet that is not for the app creator and not for the app user, but rather for the administrator, the person in the organization, which sometimes in a smaller org may be the person doing the development, right? But designed for them, for that persona, that person to understand and monitor how apps are being used in the organization and also create lightweight policies. This is a challenging area. It's a different type of persona which have different requirements, but it is very important to get right. We're making significant investments in this space because, as you mentioned, Martin, you were happy to see the strong alignment between Workspace SKUs and the people and the entitlements that a Workspace user is now able to use AppSheet out of the box. This journey here, I'll take 2 minutes to time box myself. We'll start at the Workspace admin console. You can see that under AppSheet, we have, under the AppSheet console, we have, the Google Workspace admin console, AppSheet is pinned here. We have high-level coarse grain controls built into the admin console here on the Workspace side, but finer grain controls that we ship inside AppSheet are available here in this console. Really quick walk through here. So if you're here in general, you're thinking about how to create apps in your organization. You're thinking about who's using them. You're thinking about how to effectively govern them and monitor them. And so what we have here is this is a live demo of bits that are in production. We showed this at Google Cloud Next. These are not mockups or wireframes. I see already, we have we're missing one data provider here, work in progress. This is coming to public preview here in Q2. Very excited for that. That'll be in a couple of months, as mentioned at Cloud Next. Landing page here showing at a glance from the administrator perspective, who's using apps in your organization. This would show the most popular apps. At this point, it's just a bar chart. Data provider isn't there for the moment. That's okay. We can understand from a user, a people-centric perspective, who's using the app, who are our most prolific app creators in the org. And we get an at-a-glance view of our licenses. Now, licenses are important. You really need to understand, it's very important for the administrator to understand what apps are being used, which apps require enterprise licenses, what the current entitlement is, what the current allocation is. Different types of users can be assigned different types of licenses. That's an important distinction. So let's say, for example, we see a hero creator here. We've got Sean. Click into Sean, and we can understand at a glance, again, from the administrator perspective, the things that Sean is building and what they're using, right? So these are all the apps that this person in the organization is doing. We understand the type of license assigned to them, who their auth provider is, high-level sorts of functionality here, like transferring ownership, able to have full searching, all the things that you would expect. Our goal is to have a first-class experience and be best in class here for administrative capabilities for a citizen development platform. That is our driving vision here. So, for example, we see issue tracker. Dive into that. Say, well, what is this app? Who's using it? Okay, well, it's gotten pretty heavy usage. It's increasing over time. We can look at internal versus external usage. We can see the other people who are using them, who owns it, who's editing. We can do other sorts of things. For example, understanding the history of the app, transfer ownership, make a copy of it. And that's that menu here. So, and these are kind of as you would expect. The goal is for this to feel sort of intuitive, that you can pivot on users, apps, licenses. Last thing I'll show here, and so here you see the licenses. Last thing I'll show here is we talk a lot about policies. Policies are a policy is a rule that an administrator can put it into place to control the behavior of an app. So for example, and then importantly, this can now be applied at the organization level, which is kind of a structure that we see in a lot of medium-sized companies that reflect the team structure here. So we wanted to create an organization policy. We have existing templates. We wanted to make this blanket default wide across all apps. Now we're doing this post facto, in other words, after the fact in an existing app ecosystem. And it may be the case that not everything here applies to, it may be the case that not every app is going to be compliant. So we need an experience that lets us understand if we propose a rule, which apps are in compliance, which apps aren't. So for example, if I were going to restrict an authentication provider here, we see we talked about the expression engine, fairly natural syntax we use elsewhere in AppSheet. We're going to get a live view of the applications that would be impacted by this. Having tested this here in prod again, these are on our development systems. It's coming into play. There we have. We see that if we were to put this policy or rule into effect, we have in our organization a whole lot of compliant apps. But there are a couple of apps that are not yet compliant with the proposed rule. This is itself is very useful information to have.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So let me pause there. The policies and that kind of concludes this part of the demo. Again, recapping, we want to have a first-class experience. We care greatly about the administrator persona here. It is really important to be able to understand how apps are being used in an organization and to be able to put lightweight governance in place, especially as the business evolves, because it will. I mean, the world changes in 6 months, right? So that's that demo.
That's awesome.
Never seen governance look so
yeah. I think for me, this was having supported customers and adopting AppSheet for a number of years now. And, it was great news when AppSheet Core came to Workspace. Customers, there was a hesitancy about switching it on still, just because admins are just complete control freaks. I don't know if you've experienced that before.
Experienced it myself.
Yeah.
How personal, how much we're sharing here on the call, but no, I understand. It's
so
into the
they just the immediate question was that they didn't want until they opened Pandora's box and then have to pick up the pieces afterwards. Some businesses they're quite happy to do it. So for me, this is a big piece in terms of, and I think you probably see this as well, Mike, that in terms of nurturing growth within the business with AppSheet, letting people explore what problems they can solve with AppSheet. But importantly, just for the senior management to realize the value that the product is returning to the business so that they can continue to invest in AppSheet. So one of our customers, Travis Perkins, are at the point on this journey where they now have a full-time AppSheet person within the business, and they're not there to create apps. That's part of their role, but they're about enablement. They're about helping other people in the business start using AppSheet. So
right.
I think the new console, I think that's going to be an amazing piece in the puzzle that instead of for them, I think it was a bit of a gamble.
Yes.
But now people can see the activity they can.
That's right. That's how we see it. The increased transparency is very meaningful to people, to organizations, right at that inflection point that you mentioned. That's exactly how we see it. Go ahead.
So first of all, I have a question, and I'm going to excuse myself from the control freak question that Martin had.
Okay.
I'm just spinning around for a second. One of the challenges that I've always found in kind of this whole citizen development world is people solving their own problems is how do I actually tap into what other people are solving? How, as a user of AppSheet, how can I discover other applications that maybe somebody else built in a different department or a different part of the organization that I can actually maybe reuse or join versus reinventing the wheel? What about user discovery? Not just obviously top down, but what about kind of bottoms up? How do I find the right app that already exists?
Right. It's an excellent question. There's two aspects of it. There's the concept of, okay, I'm in an organization. My org has provided a number of apps for us available. How do we get there? How do I know about them? And then, of course, there's the kind of more virality, kind of sharing, and how do you propagate and get information out about an app that might be more of a consumer-oriented app, even outside of an organization. A couple of quick answers there. Apps can be shared, just like files in Drive. When they show up, when they are shared to you and you have access to them, they show up into your My Apps page. Now that's the page here. We can, if we wanted to switch back, you can see to the screen. I've got the My Apps page here in my demo accounts here. So this is kind of an age-old question: is in any organization, from like an intranet point of view, what tools are available to me? And there's a number of perspectives on this. If you know to go here, you can click into any app. Now, this is kind of a older world. You're going in here. It's you know to go to Google Drive to find your files. What we have seen in larger organizations is an application, an AppSheet app itself, that serves as a front end or dashboard into the things that are applicable to that person in that moment in time. So role-specific, more intelligent-oriented things where you can kind of create almost like an internal, internet-oriented front end with the applications available to you. Those are two aspects, but increasingly, this ties into meeting the user where they're at. If we can move away from the very notion of, now I have task X and now I must go into app Y that I know in my mind is what will help me solve the problem for task X. If we can reduce that friction and that step, because that changes all the time. You have new people and onboarding, and it's a kind of a friction point in an organization. This is one of the catalysts for meeting the user where they're at with kind of a just-in-time sort of tool use. So, for example, travel request, I'm in a chat space. That's an existing tool that I use. I get a request that comes into the chat space or an email. I can approve it right then and there inside Google Docs with an embedded AppSheet view. There are a lot of things that on the process automation side that an employee can be able to use, not even necessarily understand, okay, there's an app. In fact, if we can abstract that concept away, it's sometimes beneficial. There are many use cases where even this notion or concept of an AppSheet thing existing isn't even there. The forms integration is an excellent example. The person submitting the Google form, which can then, this is launching today, will trigger an automation, which could then trigger, for example, a notification to somebody for an approval inside a Google chat space. Neither one of those people on the form side or the chat approval side necessarily have any idea that they're using an app at all, let alone an AppSheet app. So that's kind of the continuum, Charles, where you have, okay, I know I got my apps dashboard here, and then also where I know, large organizations may have custom front-end intranets that just link to these apps according to whatever the idiom or the concept inside the company itself is. And then this idea that in many cases you can complete your task without needing an app at all. And that's also like a victory kind of moment as well. So that's three perspectives on the discovery side. Certainly in the absence of any kind of classic app gallery like Google Workspace, the App Store and the Chrome Web Store of yours. So
absolutely,
but you could create your own AppSheet app as a storefront to your apps.
Exactly. Yep. That has been done. And yep.
I've seen that. Yeah. Hey, real quick. So this is obviously we're live, and the great thing, Mike, is you get live feedback. Some of it is wonderful praise. So Carl said the new admin console looks great and will be a great addition. Thanks for that, Carl. But of course, when you're live, you also run the risk of getting asked for features. So Stephen would like to have some features. Stephen would love to see a rich text editor for long text with HTML enabled. Closer integration to Drive would be fantastic. Drive picker and storing the ID rather than the file path. What say ye, Mike?
Thank you for this. This deeply resonates with me. It can be very difficult. Yeah, this is excellent. Stephen, thank you for these feature requests. I understand each one right away. Obviously, there's action that I'm going to take is I'm going to write these down and reconcile them, create issues for them, and see what is sensible to do. Okay, so that's the obvious action that I'm going to take for that. Can we pull up the feature request again? The very notion that there's somebody out there who is kind of plugged into this ecosystem that is calibrated to understand what they need is the best possible signal we can have from a product perspective about what is needed. Sometimes we're guessing or we're trying to extrapolating. Thank you for this. Rich text editor for long text with HTML enabled. We're talking about a form UI control. It's not just kind of long text. We're talking more than just the form fields. I think we do support this long text right now. The HTML enabled is an interesting thing. I think we're talking about Markdown, which gets us close to the rich text aspect. This is lowercase h hard, not capital H hard. Let me think about it. I'm hearing clearly want some rich text enablement. There, it's very, very sensible, and it's distinct from just pure plain text, even if it may be long form. Closer integration to Drive. Not just.
I guess this is one of your, we're a Google Workspace show, but for me as well, that's the nice thing about AppSheet is you don't have to be a Google Workspace customer. You can bring your data from elsewhere, and I suppose that is that kind of the pressure you constantly feel of, people want tighter Drive integration, but you're thinking, but then the SharePoint folks.
Exactly. Both are prioritized. AppSheet's kind of genesis was kind of prior to acquisition was to be agnostic. So this means we care greatly about the connectors for Salesforce, Office 365. And it's not just Google. Now we are inside Google. My team's job specifically is make sure we work very sensibly with our ecosystem touch points. So certainly Google Workspace, but increasingly Google Cloud. We talked about connectors at Cloud Next to make sure that we can tap into the power of GCP, especially as apps scale. We want these on-ramps, these on-roads to help people scale up their successful apps. So, but yes, we remain supportive of these other authentication providers and especially of other data sources outside of Google. We have connectors for them. Very important part of what we do. Even post acquisition in Google, these continue to be supported.
Yeah, so I'm gonna ignore yet another comment that Martin just made about outside of Workspace. Obviously, it's important. No, but I think one of the things I love that you say is meet the user where they're at.
Yeah.
Right. And so, not every application is a destination that you start and finish in, and you want to have these touch points. And I know one of the things that you focused on when you talked about your highlights, and I know something that's super, super common is being in the right tool at the right time. That's why you've done a lot of these integration things. Can you tell us why is that so important to AppSheet, and how are you continuing to kind of evolve those things? Like you've already talked about, bringing AppScript into AppSheet. You've talked about extending over into chat, all these great touch points. But just how does that become kind of like the vision?
Yes. Let me just, and I can stay later, but I'll be a little more succinct just in the interest of time. You are correct that is the vision, and it's a good question. How do we even how does that vision kind of come to fruition? A couple of ideas. When you're building an application that's designed to help businesses succeed and help people succeed, you care greatly about what their needs are. And we understand that ultimately people have a problem to solve, a business process to automate and make more efficient, and that people who are making purchasing decisions for their large companies are also caring greatly about how to make people efficient. We learned early on, especially, put yourself in the shoes of somebody in the 2015 kind of time frame. It was kind of like peak. We generated all the things, not just Google, but other places generated all of the things. We have individual apps that were cloud enabled, getting to be pretty powerful, desktop parity, an app per tab. And that kind of kicked off, and we were right on this inflection point of convergence. What we realize is, and user studies bear this out, is that context switching, it makes for an unpleasant user experience. It's confusing. It leads to lower rates of task completion. And we always remind ourselves we are here to help the user complete a task, do their job, whatever it is, right? We are a supportive capability for a business to empower their users to be able to complete their task. This is a very common kind of a refrain for anybody involved in a developer tool API space. And what we found with Drive is if we can meet the user where they're at without having to go find different places to be able to find their files. If we can save the user time, that is a very important benefit for a business. And ultimately, we're selling, and we need to be able to have a feature and a benefit that, hey, we make it possible for a person to do whatever they need to do easier and faster. and we had metrics around that. And that quick access file prediction cards at the top of the screen where I call it the Denny's method, where you kind of show up at Denny's, you look at the menu and you kind of go, you point to say, I want that Grand Slam, I want that breakfast platter. It was so powerful because people were being able to find their file in 2 seconds. But if you take that one step further, keeping the user in context in the applications that they're already in, especially from a productivity suite standpoint, saves them time and increases the rates of success for their task. And those are important. Those are sellable things because they're valuable for the person doing the job, they're valuable for the business. And so that continues to be our guiding vision. That's why we have the Gmail integration. That's why we have, in fact, AppScript is kind of an instantiation of that, because if you can stay inside the AppSheet app that's in there and then do all these other things, well, I don't need to go to this other third-party service provider and do these multi-step hoops and multiple tabs. So hopefully I was short enough to say, ultimately it is driven by the power of the better improve user experience to ultimately save them time, which is a noble task and is also important to organizations who are thinking about how to improve their business.
So first of all, I've really enjoyed this chat, but I just realized we've been talking way past time already, which is awesome. And there's so many more topics that we need to talk about. We've got AI, we've got futures, we've got feedback, we've got a brand new feature you launched today so we're way past time. I'm going to stop asking questions. I want to defer to everybody else.
I'll see if
we want to see, but we do need to wrap soon. And Mike, I almost think we need to bring it back and do more, because
the answer is absolutely yes.
This has been great, but I want to defer to Kara and Alice, who are our resident AppScript experts. Any specific questions for Mike on the integrations or the positioning or anything that you guys would love to hear before we take a pause?
Cough, AppScript bean.
AppScript bean. I haven't tried using AppScript with it yet.
I'm excited to hear more from Mike. I really want you to come back because I want to see those AI features for sure.
I want the Gemini integration.
Yes. Yeah, happy to show that. I mean, in less than 1 minute, we can. I mean, it just launched moments ago. Like in less than 1 minute, we can. It could be a good thing to wrap.
I'm for it. I vote. I give it a thumbs up.
Yes, but
yes.
But just a
thumbs up.
Yes, and just a nudge. Kara, we talked about your experience and expertise in AppScript. From a product knowledge perspective, and it's been very meaningful to me to collaborate with this. We do have the AppScript kind of low-code bridge, which has become increasingly important, especially in the generative AI world, where all of these capabilities are rolling out week over week and often with an API. And so love what you do on AppScript, and it's a very important part of AppSheet's goal to be able to make sure that we don't run into cliffs with the capabilities that are built into any kind of platform. So absolutely love it. Thank you for that. Thank you for what you do with that. And we'll talk more about it, but it's been awesome collaborating on that. And it's great to see the AppScript integration be meaningful. So thank you. Okay. All right. So and just by the way, you're okay. Just 1 more minute. All it would take is show the latest and greatest AI integration. This is kind of what we've been working for years. Just so happens to be ready to go. This is a demo that I didn't get to today, but this shows a live AppSheet generated view inside Google Chat. It's editable. It's live. It's data bound. This is where your approvals would be. But let's go back into the My Apps page where we talked about as kind of the starter page here. Just launched today. And so we click create an app. And so the goal here is the user doesn't know where to begin, right? They're here. This is a classic problem. You end up on an app front end. And where do I begin? Well, here we have start with Gemini. This is rolling out to a first cohort of users here today. And the goal is to be able to create an application with the text prompt. And as it turns out, there's a lot of information codified in existing foundational models about these fundamental concepts that go beyond just text, but the very relationships of what is involved in, for example, an employee tracking database or a medical patient database. Patients or employees and roles and tasks and managerial relationships and project mappings and all of this. This information is captured. And so we have this breakthrough where we're able to do meaningful out-of-the-box capabilities with AI just from a text prompt. And then importantly, once you create it, you can then edit it in real time and make tweaks, which is a very normal and kind of celebrated use of generative AI, where you start with something and then you use our human knowledge to be able to refine it in a way that's sensible. And so we have a 2-step process. This is just rolling out today. This is the culmination of a couple of years of work. I haven't even tested this today, but I'm going to do create an employee database. I'm going to use an exclamation mark. I don't think that's material, but I use an exclamation mark after everything. And, right now we see latencies here. Right now we are querying the model and performing model inference. I think this is on the order of 5 seconds. Okay. Here's our app. Okay, so already I'm thinking of things I didn't even know I'm thinking about. Department, benefits, the names of columns on it. Yeah, employee ID and name. Okay, link to employees and salaries, and we can tweak it from there and then continue to. But this is a great start. I already have 4 key tables. Just the tables and relationships is such a barrier to entry for somebody who knows what they want, who knows what they're doing. This is such an incredible value add to helping somebody start with something and help somebody start with a framework. And then once you have these tables in place, okay, we're going to add additional columns. I'm going to put this column here. I'm going to create this key here. I need to do an index here. I just learned what an index is, and now I can do this lookup faster. So if we create, so as an AI ML person, I always care about what are the things that are real and what are the things that are toys. Having spent, earlier days of AI, just a lot of toy things. In other words, they were interesting, fun things, but not material. Okay, here we have our app. Right out of the box, we have we're starting here. We have people. We can look at it. We can tweak it from here. We have visual first editing, where I can hover over here and change these fields. I'm in the app editor. This is from the creator perspective at this point. If I wanted to, I could go ahead and look into data sources. Here's the tab at the top, and you see all ready to go. These were the things that were generated automatically from which the actual output of the LLM. Turns out LLM can render output in whatever structure you have. It just so happens we use it in our verbal language, but a schema, an application structure, is also a language and very viable output if you can tune your model appropriately. And that's what we have here. We have departments and employees, just as promised. From here I can add an additional column. Yes, and then we can edit right here, edit the actual column inside here. Change the our caller for the feature request. We'll change it to long text in honor. I think it was Steven in Steven's honor. So now we have long text. It's not rich HTML yet. Maybe I'll code that up here. I just need coffee. Anyway, yikes! I will pause there because I'm getting a little excited. Let's just pause there. That is our demo of create an app with Gemini that helps people out of the box get started. Which in an otherwise daunting task. Thank you for giving me the chance to demo that.
So I think this is a wonderful feature. Having introduced people to AppSheet, it's something you're having conversations about relational databases and with the fact that they can just describe their problem and not only get the structure of an app, but test data as well, which is everything in terms of just fleshing it out.
Yes.
One of the things, and you might want to dodge this question, so Gemini.
I already tell you I want to dodge the question. You tell me. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, please. Yeah.
So Gemini is obviously a very large landing space for Google in terms of generative AI. So there's Gemini for Workspace, there's Gemini for AppSheet, there's Gemini for Cloud. So the feature you've just showed there, it's a Gemini for AppSheet feature. Is that going to be available to AppSheet core users for free, or are they going to have to be on a higher license for it, or an add-on?
This is a tricky question. We're a little bit out of my.
Oh, sorry, Mark, time is up, and we can go.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. It's been great.
Yeah, Martin. Just this is a tricky one because it's a very powerful feature.
Yeah.
I know that we stop sharing my screen, and there's a thing called a code stumble, which is where if you don't know, you'll stumble through it. Let me read the internal email just to see if I can get a clue. We can just not show my.
We'll let you do that.
Yeah,
and
maybe we'll.
And Charles will tell me off for asking the wrong questions.
It's good. I think the news is good. I think the news is good. But there's been so many launches lately, and most of them are intended to be
So I tell you what, don't answer that, Mike. Now it's not. You don't have to answer, Martin.
Yeah, I don't want you to lose your job because you seem like a great guy.
But we're definitely at time. I have one final thing I'd love to cover. First of all, I'm just going to put a couple links up. There's a great AppSheet blog you can follow along. There's a very vibrant community of AppSheet developers out there. You can check out the official community on Google Cloud Community and follow along. But I'd like to wrap this with you, Mike. One final question. What is the best way to get feedback to the product team, in your opinion, besides checking in here? What is the best way for folks listening to give feedback? Grievances, ideas?
Yes. Two answers right off the bat. Number one, I am available for ideas and thoughts. And one of my favorite things about AppSheet, embracing its kind of startup centric ethos, while also learning how to kind of grow up in a much larger company, is that we have a teaching from our founder, Praveen, which is to be very customer driven. So we care greatly about what's in the community. We always have to balance out the strategic oriented things and the different personas. But that is the best way to get feedback. Every role monitors the community. You will see individual software engineers posting in the community responses. I'll be making an announcement there later. So the AppSheet, it's just AppSheet Community is the best way, and that has everybody's eyes on it. Thank you for that. And by that, I mean everybody. As a way, it's almost like you really need to understand where your customer pain points are. So we read that. When I'm on call, I'm especially reading it. So that's a great way. You can always reach out to me directly. At Cloud Next, it was extra invigorating just realizing the energy that our customers bring and the realization of how people are making big bets on their businesses on Google. And it made me double down and just make sure that in my role, I'm available. So those are two aspects. Find me directly. There's also in-product help that is monitored.
Yeah, I just put back up here. Mike did a great session Next, where he actually got through all the topics because we weren't peppering him with questions. But if you want to check out some of these things live, you can definitely pull that down and just take a look there as well too. First of all, again, Mike, thank you again. I'm reinvigorated watching. I'm ready to go code free. I think it's amazing stuff. Anybody else any final thoughts before we pass it over to Martin? And Martin is not going to use our sign-off tagline today because we're not going to say what we normally say. We're going to say something else because this is, after all, a code-free solution. Martin, do you want to close us out with?
Well, I know we're long, but if you are in London on the 23rd of May, CTS Apps Broker, where I work, are hosting a free AppSheet hackathon at the Google London offices. So
tempting, very tempting.
All day, free. If someone keeps talking for just a tiny bit more, I'll find the link.
Well, we can.
We'll put it in the show notes. You'll see it. We'll put it on the description.
I know there's
we'll see if we can get Mike.
Yeah, good. Some other GDE events. I'd love to be a part of that. Love what you do. Left unsaid is that the developer relations, this function has been very near and dear to my heart for my entire career at Google. The entire Drive API was basically the product creation of people with that skill set, which is incredible. Love to support the developer community. Please think about ways I can continue to engage with you and support you there.
With that, thank you very much, Mike. Fabulous session. We're definitely getting you back.
Can't wait to be back. Really, this is so much fun. This was so much fun. I am so grateful to have these. These are career highlights for me. Thank you for thinking of me. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you for dealing with my rambling. I hope the questions were, the answers were.
We never got to what was put on the wall behind you, other than guitars. But anyway, I'm distracting.
Oh, marathon medals. Here, I'll end with this. Yeah, you're like, okay. This is my London Marathon medal. Yeah, totally unscripted, including going way over time. So London is near and dear to my heart, and I would love to come back there again when the time is right. So.
All right, Mike. Let's get guitars out and play.
Here we go.
Until next time, folks. We're gonna play us out. Until then, happy no coding.
Thank you for having me on the show.